Let me start?
Let's party.
I do.
Kurt, you ready? Yes. All right. Ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Bring this meeting to order at 5:30. And our first order of business is approving the minutes from the January 15th meeting. We did not have a February meeting due to inclement weather, so we're going in a look back to January. Anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion from Doug. Second?
I second.
You have a second from Brenda. All right, any further comment? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries. Minutes approved.
Caleb just arrived.
Welcome, Caleb.
Hi, Caleb.
Hey, everybody.
All right, before I go to public comment, I'm required to read this statement. The public is allowed to speak at public comment after first being recognized by the chair, except that any complaints or comments regarding individually identifiable officers are not allowed. Rather, any such comments or complaints may be provided to the board in writing, and the board will forward such comment or complaint to the appropriate person within the Lawrence Police Department. The board may establish reasonable limitations on the allowed length of public comment. As a general practice, the board will not discuss or debate these items, nor will it make decisions on items presented during this time. The allowable length is 3 minutes, and do we have anyone who wants to make public comment?
No one online, Mr. Chair, and doesn't look like anybody in the room.
Okay, then we will move on to Part C, the agenda items, and the first up is the monthly complaint report. And Chief Lockhart, if you would, I'd like to talk about these individually because I have some questions on a couple
Okay.
of them.
So for January, we had, looks like one complaint. It was, we've got the date received there, January 23rd. Disposition was exonerated. The findings letter had not been sent yet, so we do not have that date on there. Those were two things that you had requested. This one was a complaint about someone not leaving the property, and the complainant alleged that there was improper use of force. Upon review, we determined that there was the force was appropriate, and the body camera did not support the complainant's allegations.
Does anybody have any questions about this particular complaint?
I have a comment.
Okay, well, go with your comment, and then I have some questions.
I felt like this summary was much more understandable about what happened.
Okay.
So the reader could go through and go, now I understand.
Gotcha. Okay. Good feedback.
I think some of my questions are more about detail, if you don't mind. My first question is, it says, once officers arrived, how many officers were there, and is it, what's the protocol for what number of officers we send?
So on something like this, it would be 2 officers, wouldn't it?
Do you know what it came out as?
It would have been a disturbance, somebody not leaving.
A disturbance typically is 2 officers are dispatched.
Okay, so protocol is 2 officers to go. And then it says he could no longer remain on the property. What reason did management give for that?
I don't have an answer for that. Typically, when we get there on these, if they are asking them to leave, it's just, they don't want them to be there.
It doesn't matter what the reason is? Since it's private property, the owners
Private property. It's
say you
a,
need to leave?
yeah, and it's a hotel, so I'm guessing maybe he overstayed
Okay,
what he's being paid. I don't have that specific detail.
I would
Okay.
say it came out as a disturbance. Maybe he was causing a disturbance.
That could be too.
okay. It would be helpful to know, though, just to
Yeah.
get the context of what's going on. Number 3, what are ASP handcuffs?
It's a brand. It's
Just a brand?
Yeah.
Okay. And those are the standard handcuffs, I understand, that the officers use?
Yeah, we started issuing ASP handcuffs probably in 2018.
2018? Okay. And what's a
Yes, it's
wrist,
just a brand.
what's a wrist lock?
A wrist lock is when it's short, you can just show them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an escort thing, so you
Okay,
get the
And
arm.
then sometimes too, this could be considered a wrist lock where you use your chest to keep back pressure on the elbow.
okay.
And it's just a way of controlling a person.
Got it, okay. This is helpful for me to understand and get.
And I don't know
context.
if you can see that as I was covering.
I kind of got the idea,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a hand, you take somebody to a wrist lock to get handcuffs on, so you got their arms back
Yeah, so you
there.
could put their arm behind their back.
Arms bent back?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a standard procedure as
It is.
well? Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm good.
All right.
Are the asp cuffs, are they hinged or are they chained?
Chained.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on that? All right. For, yes, no?
No, not.
Okay. February, we had 2 complaints here. The first one received on February 5th. It was exonerated. Findings letter was mailed on March 3rd. This one was the officer drove through the grass, displayed of firearms, gave him commands to stop and get on the ground. I believe the actions of the officer were too much. When we talked to him, he started talking about other arrests and other incidents. Body camera review did not support the allegations. The officer responded to a disturbance regarding a stolen vehicle. Employees were in the parking lot, directed the officer toward the direction the complainant had left. The officer located the complainant, instructed him to stop. He fled. The officer pursued him by vehicle with emergency equipment. He ran into the roadway of a major city street, ran around vehicles. The complainant opened the rear door of a vehicle that was stopped. The vehicle had a small child in the rear passenger seat. The officer pursued the complainant on foot. He was able to pull the complainant from the car and push the complainant to the ground. The officer held the complainant on the ground until the complainant placed his hands behind his back and he was placed into handcuffs. He did have a taser out, but did not have a firearm out, as the complainant alleged.
Anybody have any other questions or comments? I do have some questions.
Yep.
None? Okay, my first question is, when we issue the findings letter, does the findings letter include information about how to appeal?
It does.
Okay, perfect. Second question, it says excessive force by pointing the firearm at the complainant. Did we determine that that the taser was what
Correct.
the person saw and determined was a firearm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It also says in the third paragraph, I noted the complainant made additional allegations. What were they?
Additional allegations about other contacts with police, not about this incident.
Okay, so it was just general
Yes,
previous.
he started talking about like previous contacts with the police, previous arrests. It was almost like a laundry list, like I'm making a
Okay.
complaint about this incident and then a bunch of other things as well.
Okay, gotcha. All right. That's all I had on this one. Anybody else? All right.
All right. Next one we've received on the 11th of February, exonerated it. Findings letter went out March 11th. This was a search and seizure. This is the correspondence initially started via email, is how we received it. Offered for her to view the body camera of the incident. She said she would like to, but then she initially chose to review the video on February 26th. And she said that it was too far to drive. She further advised she would contact Lieutenant Murray after her meetings on 2/26. He did not receive an email or a voicemail from her in reference to the appointment. The investigation revealed the officers were conducting what we call directed enforcement in a high call load area in the city. Observed this vehicle driven by the complainant driving in the area without stopping at a residence. So again, feeling like there was some suspicious activity. Observed the vehicle committed a traffic violation and stopped the vehicle. While conducting the traffic stop, a canine officer arrived. The officer and his canine conducted a cursory sniff of the vehicle. The canine alerted to the odor of narcotics. The officer conducted a search of the vehicle, located 2 firearms inside the vehicle, but not any narcotics. And then the complainant was issued a warning for the traffic infraction. So the observance of traffic infraction is probable cause to conduct a traffic stop. The canine indication of the odor of narcotics is probable cause for a search and seizure, or search of the vehicle, and probable cause exception to the need for a search warrant because it was a vehicle. Body camera did not support the complainant's allegations.
Okay, any questions or comments on this complaint? Okay, I have some more complaints, questions on this one as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did the complainant refuse the search?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, you saw the video, so she didn't indicate any problems with the search?
I don't believe so.
Okay, what parts of the auto were searched?
The interiors, what
Just the interior, not the trunk?
I don't remember all the particular areas.
Okay. And we stopped her for a traffic infraction. Why was the canine officer called in?
It looks
How
like
long did it take to get one there?
it looks like he was, from reading the complaint report looks like he was there when he made the stop, like the K-9 was the backup officer. Is the way I read that.
So the canine was already with the officers that pulled the person over.
Says, while conducting the traffic stop, a K-9 officer arrived. So my recollection is that he maybe came up to the back officer.
Did you guys have questions about that? You see
That was kind of my same question as you, is what was the time delay between the time of the stop and when the K-9 officer showed up? Because there is probable cause, and that's all you need for a search of a vehicle when you have a K-9 hit. But the Supreme Court has also said there's a reasonableness of how long the person has to wait.
Well, and that would have been something we would have looked at during the
Okay.
complaint. If that was an issue, it would have been identified in the report that we received.
Okay. I think that would be one of those useful things to say.
Well, and one thing you'll have to remember
The K-9
is
officer was on scene, or it.
the purpose of the report is to inform you of the complaints, not to give you every detail about every complaint. So, we could make an overly detailed report, but that's not what the purpose of the complaint report is. So, there are going to be some details that are not going to be in the report.
Is it okay that we ask these questions?
Yeah, you can ask the questions, and if you're uncomfortable with something, then we can meet with you privately to talk about it, because not everything that's in that investigative file is considered a public document and public information. So what we're giving you is what is the public information. Complaints and their contents and dispositions are considered personnel records.
I would suppose that we would rely on you to tell us if a question is out of bounds for that.
Yeah, and I don't think any of them are out of bounds. It's
Okay.
just that it may not all be in this report. So that's.
I think in part, the detail of my questions is a learning experience for
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
To better understand what happened.
Right.
And why, because as I see it, we really have two roles as a board. One is to hear the appeals. The other is kind of a public watchdog on the complaints. Do you disagree, or?
It's, that specific purpose isn't outlined in the ordinance.
Okay.
Part of what the complaint report is so that you all can track them and make sure that they're being, if there's an appeal or a disposition of one that might be an appeal, that you would be able to track that so that we can't not disclose that to the public. Not that you would be looking at the investigation to determine if something was appropriate or not.
And that's not what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you for the update.
You are welcome.
All right. Future agenda items.
We got our training next, sir.
Oh, our training, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Number 2, board training for fair and impartial policing.
And give me a minute here. We're going to do a little screen share, and then I'll pass it over to Sergeant Shipley is here for this with you. And why can't I find it?
Green button at the bottom of Zoom.
Yeah, go to
I
the.
can't even find
Zoom.
the, oh, it's minimized. That's what it is. There we go.
There you go.
And I'm going to move you, try to move you over here. There we go. All right. Slideshow.
Of course, it moved you over to the.
Yeah,
other
there you go. All right, this is Sergeant Megan Shipley. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more. She's one of our patrol sergeants and also one of
Is that
our.
okay on this screen? You guys want it on the other one?
No, actually, you gotta do it on the other one because it's just sharing where I can see the PowerPoint interface. It's not the slideshow view.
So I got to put it over here? No, I got to change the screen size.
Yeah, keep
Sides.
the share and try it one more time.
Okay,
Sorry.
you're fine. What if I do that?
That's, no, there, okay, you got it. Way to go.
Nice.
I should have let you drive instead of me. You're more, you might have a new
I
job.
had training unit experience during COVID, so I got
yeah.
very good at Zoom, unfortunately. Like Chief said, I'm Sergeant Megan Shipley. I've been with the police department for almost 12 years now. I am in charge of our fair and impartial policing training. There are 3 of us currently that are certified to teach. We're working on sending a 4th. I will take you guys through this training. I will ask for some participation. It's a little more fun that way, knowing that some of the questions are kind of more police related, so you may or may not know the answers, but that's okay. We can work through it. Unfortunately, Brenda has seen this before. She attended last year when we taught, but she said she would graciously attend again.
I did. I volunteered.
And now you're here.
And now she's here. So here's just a little history about fair and impartial policing. It was founded by Dr. Lori Friedel in 2008. The training curriculum focuses on the science of bias, how implicit biases can impact a person in their professional capacity, the consequences of bias decision-making, skills to reduce and manage biases. Again, all of our instructors are certified by FIP experts at a Train the Trainer class that is 2 days. Here's just a training overview. Every new hire that is a sworn hire goes through an 8-hour training. And then we teach annual trainings that are typically 1 to 2 hours. It really depends on participation. When we get a class that really participates, it can go for almost a full 2 hours. And those include the slideshow that you'll see here is the annual training that we just put on, minus we did some tabletop scenarios this year, and then the policy review is also part of that annual training. All the material that we use is provided by the Fair and Impartial Policing LLC. And like I had stated earlier, there's 3 certified instructors within our department, and hopefully a 4th will be certified here this year. So just, again, I'm gonna give you guys kind of this like 15-minute down and dirty rundown, but there is a full 8-hour class, so try to stay with me here, and if you have questions, just ask. So the fundamental concepts of a human bias, right? So bias is a normal human attribute. Everyone has it. Biases are often unconscious or implicit. Implicit biases manifest even in individuals who at a conscious level reject prejudice and stereotypes. Implicit bias can influence our actions, and understanding how implicit bias can affect our perceptions and behaviors, that's the first step in reducing and managing our bias, right? So it's not, previously trainings would be like, you're bad, you suck, you don't know what you're doing. This one says, hey, it's okay. We all have them. We just need to understand that we have them and learn how to control them or notice when we're doing something based off of this implicit bias. They use these 4 bias as kind of their main ones. So implicit association, attentional bias, confirmation bias, and then the we-they bias. So implicit association is we categorize people and link them to the characteristics or the stereotype associated with their group, right? So this is where I'm going to ask for participation. Can anyone think of one or name one that would be an implicit association?
All college students.
Homeless college students,
Yeah, right?
Sometimes homeless college students.
military.
Oh,
We're teetering. We're teetering.
yeah. So anything that you would think, and then you think of a protected class that fits with those things, any kind of stereotype. Attentional bias is basically who do we focus on? Who do we look at first? Who do we listen to first? Who do we pay attention to? Who do we pay attention to the longest? This one you may get the answer, you may not. Typically the answer I hear from the police department is like on a domestic. Most of the time people will pay attention to the female first, right? Because it's just kind of a long running stereotype that the female is the victim, right? But that's not necessarily true. Can anyone think of another one that might be an intentional bias? I have another one from years of training officers, right? When you walk into a place where a person is called the police, they can tell that that other person is very new, and they will immediately direct their attention to the person who's training, right? That's right. They're paying attention to me first, when realistically they need to be paying attention to them. All right, confirmation bias. So we focus on evidence that affirms what we already know. Confirmation bias is a tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. We give disproportionately less consideration to alternative possibilities. Can anybody think of a confirmation bias or a moment where you saw something that confirmed a bias you had? And it's okay to share if you can think of one. I have a really good one.
Asian drivers
Asian drivers and what?
being bad.
Being bad, right? And then anytime you see an Asian driver who is driving badly, you're going to pay more attention to that than you would if you saw an Asian driver driving well. right? Cops and donuts.
Well, that's true. I mean,
But you're gonna pay more attention to me if I'm saying they're eating a donut than if I'm saying they're eating a carrot, right? That's confirmation bias. We're gonna look at things and take more information from what we believe is what we know. The we-they bias, this one's pretty easy. Our in-group or out-group tendencies, every human is much more comfortable with their we, right? We typically see more positive characteristics in our we. This one is pretty easy. Can anyone think of an in-group, out-group? What is your in-group? I'm much more comfortable around police officers, right? That's my in-group. I'm much more comfortable around my family. That's my in-group. Anybody else want to share? All right. Profiling by proxy. Unfortunately, we do still experience this one here in Lawrence. So I always find it relevant to leave this slide in there every annual training. So we have to be aware of other people's biases, community member calls, or even potentially fellow officers' biased behavior. The community member calls that I like to give out as examples are, that person doesn't belong here. I want you to check on them. What does that mean? And what are they doing? It's not a crime to not belong there, right? So we have to be very careful about making sure that we don't allow somebody else to make us seem biased on face, right? Procedural justice. This is the procedure used by law enforcement officers where community members are treated with respect, dignity, and fairness. They talk about 4 elements. The 4 elements of procedural justice are respect, trustworthiness, voice, and neutrality. The biggest thing I'd like to say with this one is that the community is like a bank. We have to put deposits in so that we can take deposits out, right? When we're asking for help identifying a person or help with information in relation to a crime. If we haven't done these 4 elements of procedural justice and put the deposits in the bank, there's nothing to withdraw. So when we go on every call, we need to remember these 4 things and utilize them to put those deposits in that bank. So some key FIP concepts and skills. The biggest one obviously is to be aware of other people's biases and the profiling by proxy. Reduce ambiguity by slowing it down. We talk about this a lot. In a tactical world, we talk about time and distance. It gives you more time to make decisions. And it'll let you get out of what we call your lizard brain, right? I can get out of my lizard brain and get back into my cognitive brain and make better choices. Same thing applies here. When we can, it's not always possible, but when we can, we should slow it down. Remembering procedural justice, putting those deposits into that bank, knowing our agency's unbiased policy. And then the litmus test is a really good one. So it's good to ask yourself, would I be treating this person this way, but for the fact that she or he is blank, right? So using the Asian driver one, right? Would I be believing this Asian driver is a bad driver because they're Asian? If the only answer is yes, then I have a bias and I need to check myself. That's all I have. I'll take questions if you have them.
I do have a question. Go
Sure.
back to where you were talking about there's nothing wrong with being in the wrong place. You said it was based, keep going back.
The person doesn't belong
The
here.
person doesn't.
Oh, you were talking about profiling by proxy.
Profiling by proxy.
Yes.
Okay. So I hate to go back to this, but the third complaint that we brought up, one of the reasons for the stop was officers were conducting directed enforcement in a high call load area of the city. So there was suspicion that this individual, as I read it, might have been casing the area, right?
No, it's actually an area, it's an apartment complex where we're having a lot of narcotics-related
A lot of
calls.
narcotics, okay.
Yes, so they're doing narcotics enforcement.
So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what's the line between pulling the person over there and profiling by proxy?
So to me, at least in this instance, right, the profiling by proxy is a person that lives in the neighborhood. It's like there's a car parked out on the street and there's a person in it. I've never seen them before. They don't belong here. I want you to come check them out.
Okay,
Well, it may not be a high crime area.
okay.
There's really nothing criminal that's gone on other than a person sitting in their car.
Okay, so that's the only thing, is that the person sitting in their car that you haven't seen before, there needs to be something else to drive that
Right.
additional action.
Right.
Got it, okay.
Hopefully that explained that. Okay.
No, I think you did.
Okay.
I think you did.
Anyone else?
That-
I know it was down and dirty. It was a lot, when you intended with the officers, it was much better. You got to do the scenarios, which was better.
That does just make me think of like the possibility to, open up. We know that like
Yes.
people who live in like high crime areas are typically lower income.
I'm not going.
And just so I like the training a lot. I think it's interesting. And I wonder if there's even more we can do to kind of look at, okay, well, where are we policing the most? And then are we overly looking at these areas and, kind of recreating this cycle of poverty for a lot of our community members? I don't know. Is that maybe where you're trying to go with that?
I think it's just kind of understanding where the line is between someone sitting in their car and someone sitting in their car, and there's enough there to say, hey, we need to look at this.
Right.
I guess that's kind of where I'm going at. Now, you're right. I mean, there are areas that it probably makes sense that we look into, but I'm just trying to get it in my head, kind of that distinction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I think I hear what you're saying too, Adam, where you're talking about over-policing just for that sake, because there's maybe not a lot of calls there, but we know there may be something there. I know one of the scenarios that I did when I did the online training this year is you have an officer who is going to patrol lower income areas because they think that people may not have insurance or they may have junkier cars, and so they go over there to do high or increased enforcement. That is a bias. That's saying that if you are in a lower income area that you're going to have junky cars and no insurance. That's a bias, and that would be, it's an implicit bias, but being aware of that, knowing that you can modify your behavior and realize that's not a reason to stop people or conduct enforcement activity. And that's, so that was part of the training I went to. I don't know if it's one of our scenarios in the training this year or not, but it was.
No, you did KLTC.
KLTC.
So that was the other thing that I didn't include. So we always have in-house training, but KLTC always does an annual training as well because it's required by state statute that you have annual training. Everyone tries to go to our in-house one, but obviously sometimes things come up, schedules happen, so then they end up taking the online version.
Yeah, and it's different.
It's-
It's
yeah,
kind of good.
it's good.
The state law requires we all have 1 hour a year, and so you can do it online or you can do it with ours. I like ours better because so much of what we do is training and teaching our officers the Lawrence way to police, and it's different from other police departments. And so having our people do this training and customize it, it's the same reason we have an academy. We get to teach our people the proper way, the Lawrence way to do things, which for policing in Lawrence is the proper way. It is different than other cities. And so for all of you, I don't know how many of you have been on a ride along, but I would still encourage you to come out and spend a shift with an officer and just let me know and we can set that up. We have 10-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can ride for an hour, 2 hours, up to the whole 10 hours, whatever you want to do. And I know the officers appreciate seeing you out there, and you really, you get to see a side of the city that you don't normally get to see, but you also get to meet some of the hardworking men and women that are out there protecting us when we're home doing other things. So it's a good way to understand that. And then asking those questions, that's really important too, because now you're getting it right from the people that do it every day.
That sort of also leads me into another question I had is how do your officers respond to this training? So Sergeant Shipley, you said you've been here 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so how long of that time have you been doing the FIP training?
I have been doing it for, let's see, it's 25. I went to the training in 20, so 5 years. I think the training is very well received, and I think they do prefer to hear it from people they work with, right? Previously, before we went to the FIP training, they would bring in outside trainers, and that was never well received.
Very much that we, they kind of thing.
Exactly, right, the in-group, out-group, very good. You paid attention. We're proud of you. Yeah, I think it is well received. There are still people who just don't want to participate in trainings, and that there's really nothing that we can do about that. But they do like to do the scenarios. They like to have good discussion about the scenarios. And I enjoy that they actually will participate. Makes my job a lot easier. Then I don't have to talk as much.
And FIP's been around, so I met Dr. Friedel when I was in Kansas City in 2001, 2002. She actually just recently retired, so she's now a professor emeritus in Florida. But they've been doing this for a long time, and when I was in Warrensburg, we brought them in to do this FIP there, and it's always been well received by the police and the community. We did an FIP police community there. We also did one here, and Dr. Friedel came in and did that. She's one of the country's experts on implicit bias, and I like the way this training is presented because I've been getting diversity training since I started being a police in 1990, and most diversity trainings came in to tell you that you were racist, that because you're racist, that's why you became a police officer and you treat people poorly. This comes at it from a completely different way, and it doesn't make the officers defensive. It makes them, I think, understand the training better, understand bias better, and if you notice, there's nothing in there that says you're a bad person because you have a bias. We all have implicit bias, and that's in policing. Our biases are what help us survive sometimes too. So it's not necessarily a bias in as much as it is understanding situations, being able to read people, being able to understand situations. We have to make decisions very quickly, and that's where understanding your implicit bias can help ensure that you aren't behaving in a way that's inappropriate, and that's why we do the training. But it's everywhere I've been in 3 agencies now, and this training has been well received in all 3 of them.
Do we do anything to track the effectiveness of the training? Is there any data that we follow?
So that would be kind of difficult because it is implicit, and so it's
Okay.
unconscious, right? So you would
Okay.
have to ask officers, what do you believe your implicit biases are? And then after the training, did you feel like you were better able to handle? I mean, I guess we could ask
could-
that question,
You
but
could track the complaints that are made that allege bias,
sure,
if there's a trend there, I suppose.
yeah.
We do
But your point is well taken about, you know.
Yeah, it would be it would be a tough data point for sure.
And my second question is, given what's going on in the federal government right now, are you getting any pushback about this particular training?
No.
And I'm talking about DEI.
Yeah, no, I have not received any emails from any important people who have told me to not do this,
I'm
so,
glad to hear that. Thank you.
yeah.
And this is something that's in state law, so we have to deliver this training. So unless the legislature decides that we don't have to and changes that, we'll continue to deliver it. I think even if it weren't required, for me, there's so many good elements of just good policing in here that I think we would continue to present the training even if it weren't required, just because of the nature of how it helps us understand and treat people better.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
And, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so kind of going off what he had mentioned about the testing the effectiveness of it, I know it might be difficult to do that, but have you noticed any differences before and after the training?
Me personally, no.
Okay,
But obviously, I don't work 24/7. As much as
Sure.
I would like to say I could be a robot, I really can't. I do require some sleep. No. I think the biggest difference that I have noticed is participation in the class.
Okay.
Because classes, when I first started, were like what the chief was talking about, basically calling you a bad person. Well, who wants to listen to a training when you're
Right.
getting told you're a bad person? Like, well, I'm automatically not going to listen, right? Whereas this doesn't do that. And I try to, and so do the other instructors, try to make an open environment where people feel that they can share what they might think, right? Like what one of their implicit bias might be, and not be judged for that, because it's okay to have it. And it's better if you actually know, because then you're more likely to take a step back and say, the litmus test, right? You're more likely to go back and test the litmus test and go, oh, okay, that's what I want them to do. So I think just we ended up with people who were actually willing to participate in the training. But I haven't noticed necessarily a difference per se on the street.
okay.
And we have, the previous CPRB asked us about this very thing as well. And there are some ways out there to measure implicit bias, but there's not a lot that are valid and have been tested, because it is a difficult concept to measure. So if you all go home tonight and Google, how do you measure implicit bias, and can you do it? There are some instruments out there that can do it, but they're not reliable enough to be able to use in policing. And I think the other part of that would be, if we're not using something that's reliable, we could affect an officer's credibility in court when they testify. So if we use an unreliable instrument, it says, hey, this officer's got implicit bias, that could be misinterpreted in a court setting where you're like asking about what the officer's implicit bias score is or something like that. So we do monitor videos. So we do random reviews of videos. You have to do 2 or 3 a month.
2 a week.
To a week of the officers that you're assigned. So, and the body camera program generates those random reviews for the sergeants. So we are doing that. We just started that last year. So the supervisors can look for a misconduct, could look for instances of bias. We also collect traffic stop data. So when we have a complaint about bias, we can go look at that traffic stop data and see if the officer has demonstrated a propensity for bias-based policing, or stops, or I'm sorry, searches and hit rates, so we can examine those as well. So we do have a number of data points to look for this stuff, and then the training is important. And then the other part of that too is we have a lot of supervisors out on our streets. We try to encourage our supervisors to be out there and watching the officers. So I always talk about proper hiring is your first pillar, proper training, we do our own academy, ongoing training, we do this, proper supervision, and good policies. Those 5 things really try and minimize it. You're not going to eliminate it, but you can minimize the impact that improper policing would have on how officers conduct themselves with those things.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just still wrestle with where, we all observe patterns, and we all develop a sense that when we see X, Y, and Z, this is what's going on. And I know that with police officers, that's called experience. And once you develop that, I guess that's where the confirmation bias comes in. If you've seen X, Y, and Z, you are certain the result is there and you're going to see it. But, I know I'm my biases, but it's just so interesting to me where experience ends and bias begins.
Yeah, and I think as we get older, I know if I look back on 1990, Officer Lockhart, and 2025, Chief Lockhart, I wouldn't recognize myself. You're inexperienced. I was 22 years old. I thought I knew everything about everything. And now that I have kids that are that age, I'm like, wait a minute, I remember how that was. And it's the old adage that your parents get smarter as you get older, but the reality is it's not them getting smarter, it's you getting smarter and realizing that they were that wise all along. And so the gray hair means something, the wrinkles mean something, the extra weight means something. I've learned a few things along the way, and yes, I've learned more about my biases. I am much more aware of my biases today. And so, it's something that we have a very young department, and I think we have even young supervisors. Shipley's been 3 years now, and
Yeah.
Shipley's young, and but she's good. She's wise beyond her years. But even if you were to ask her where she was when she started and where she is now, a lot has changed, and it's going to change even more. I think I was probably in my 30s when I was realizing, slowing it down, taking your time, not rushing in is better than 22-year-old, rushing in and trying to, solve the situation instantly. Just take some time, take a step back. Time's on our side. I've got all night. So that's the benefit of wisdom.
Thank you. Caleb, I don't want to ignore you. Do you have any questions or comments?
I don't, thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, thank you for the training, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next item agenda is D1, future agenda items. We can talk about future agenda items. Chief Lockhart and I were also discussing the possibility of reviewing our cadence of meetings to every other month as opposed to every month. And I'd like to hear from the board on how they feel about that.
And just so you all know, I also let Michael know, you all have completed all of your required training now. So you are all fully in compliance with the ordinance. So thank you for being patient with us on that. It took us a little bit of time, but this was the final thing that we had to get done. So you are all full-fledged members now.
Good job, team.
Yeah.
So how do we feel about every other month as opposed to monthly meetings?
I would appreciate it.
You would appreciate that, okay. I would as well. However, there are two things that I think I'd like to see us accomplish, whether that's every month or every other month. The first is I'd like to continue our discussion of community outreach. and letting the community know more about their rights to appeal these decisions. And so I'd really like to have a facilitated discussion, whether it's next month or the month after, about what we might do. Getting out in front of the public, whether that's at different meetings. I'm trying to think of the groups that meet on a regular basis, community.
Yeah, Rotary,
Rotary,
Optimists,
Optimists, the
chamber
public
events.
library, chamber events.
Yeah, we are, the police department is part of the chamber, so if you all don't get chamber emails, you can subscribe to those. You would fall under, the city's a member too, so you'll fall under one of two umbrellas with the city or the police department. And I'll work on getting y'all some name tags that you could wear when you go to chamber events, but those are open to you as well.
I'd also like to see us get some cards printed up
Yeah,
that
I
has
need to
that
do that too.
information on it.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks, we can hand them the card, and it would be great if it had the QRS thing on it where you can just put your phone and it'll take you right to where you can file the complaint. I'm not looking for more complaints, but I want
No,
us
I
to
think
be
that's
open
good. Yeah.
to that. The second thing I'd like to see that we do in the future is, you and I had talked about practicing an appeal.
Yeah.
'Cause I think it would be a really good idea to go through the process of how an appeal is actually handled. There is a certain protocol the city requires. That way, when we get an actual complaint that's appealed, we're ready to go. We hit the ground running. So,
And if you like, I can put both those on for our next meeting,
Yeah.
and we can make sure we have those.
so do we need a vote, or are we okay with just saying there's no April meeting, we'll meet next in May?
May, and let me get
Good.
that date for everybody.
Has to make a motion
You think we need to make a motion on that one?
because we've already made a motion to have it every month.
Okay,
I think we need to make a motion.
I'm happy to make a motion, have a motion. Do you want to make the motion?
Make a motion to move to bi-monthly versus once-a-month meetings.
Okay, we have a motion to go to bi-monthly meetings. Doug's made the motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Kristen seconds. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion? Go ahead.
Yeah. What about, since we have this time slot, and I'm sure the city staff might have a different opinion, but what about keeping this available? Because if there is something in order to address it in a timely manner, then we could go ahead and meet in the odd month. Or I guess
Okay.
it would be the even month.
So I'll just,
So we're making an amendment to the motion.
Well,
I'll just keep the meeting on the calendar, and then we'll just meet every other month.
exactly.
Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Because if there is something, that we want to address quickly, then we have that.
And certainly if appeal comes up, we're going to
Right,
want to address
right.
that in a timely manner.
So let me retract that.
We will make an amendment to the motion.
And the amendment will be that it is an every other month meeting with tentative ad hoc meetings on the bi-months.
And
Oh, yes, I second.
you're seconding the amended motion, right? Any further comment? Good input? Any further comment? Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any nays? Motion carries.
I did not hear Caleb.
Caleb Nade.
I thought I
I said aye. No, I didn't say nay. Oh,
okay.
I said aye.
thought I heard him say aye.
Lag. He was lagging.
Yep, that's all right.
We're moving too fast.
Okay, I do have a question. We can join in virtually?
It's preferred in person, but yes, you can virtually if you need to.
Well, my son, his baseball schedule's starting.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Put some earbuds in. You might see my mouth moving, but I'll be on mute.
Okay, very good. May 21st then is the next one.
Okay.
It's Free State's graduation, so I don't know if anybody besides me will need to be there, but you'll have a different face other than me, so, which is not a problem. It
Okay.
won't be Shipley.
It won't be?
No.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah. All right, so May 21st, 5:30.
Yes, May 21st is the next
Yep.
meeting.
Got it.
Okay, and then you and I can figure out when we want to meet to put agenda.
Yep, that'll work.
Okay. All right, any further issues that we need to discuss? Hearing none, I'm going to call this meeting to a close. Thank you.
Good job, team.
How about that, man? 1814. That is definitely a CPRB.